Hello, Internet! Fantastic Mr. S here again, and you're watching Dangerously Rockin' Reviews! You know, the music world is full of possibilities, and so many bright young artists ready to take it on and make a difference in it. But then there are those artists who throw all that potential straight out the window, either by making crappy or mediocre songs, or by making great songs but never expanding upon it. But hey, there's no use complaining about it. Let's just complain about the artists in question, shall we? This is my list of the top 10 artists who have wasted their potential. Number 10! Ellie Goulding? Ellie Goulding? Whatever. A unique and good sounding voice these days, that's a rarity. And thankfully, LEG happens to be one of those diamonds in the rough. And while her lyrics aren't much, they're not bad. The only problem I have with her songs, and it is a big problem, is her overuse of electronic assets. Typical. I think if she incorporated real instruments more often, as well as toned down on those poppy vocal melodies, then her voice could really shine through. You want proof of that? Then go watch fellow YouTuber Kobus's drum cover of Burn. I'm serious. That dude can turn a mediocre track like Burn into gold. Number 9! I can't believe I'm saying this, but Taylor Swift. No! I'm not gonna sugarcoat anything here. I hate Taylor Swift's music. I hate her bad breakup lyrics as well as her other relationship-related songs, and I especially despise her singing voice. I'm sorry, but it's annoying as hell. So why is she even on this list? Well, try listening to some of these bits and see if you can find the reason.
Next chapter.
He's like, I still love you, and I'm like, I mean, this is exhausting.
The fella over there with the hella good hair, won't you come on over, baby, we can shake, shake, shake.
Notice whenever she goes into spoken word mode, those are the only times when her voice actually sounds good. And on top of that, she's also been quite outspoken in the media about the ills of the music industry, as these articles have shown. Okay then, why don't you just write songs about your views on the music world? That'd be far more intriguing than, say, this bullcrap. That was just awful. Hell, she could just do an entire spoken word album. Yeah, it would piss off her hardcore fan base, but screw it, I'd listen to it. Besides, she wouldn't be the first musical artist to do that. And if it meant not having to hear her god-awful attempts at high-pitched singing for once, well then, fine by me. Number 8! Hoku. Now who is this Hoku character, you're probably wondering? Well, if you watch the opening to the movie Legally Blonde,
On this perfect day, nothing's standing in my way.
yeah, that's her singing on it. She had another hit too called Another Dumb Blonde, but that was never even nearly as famous as the other song I just mentioned. Sadly, her glory days came to an end a year later after she fell out with her record label. She hasn't been able to do much since. She hasn't even been heard from since she opened for Gwen Stefani back in 2007. Really puts the meaning back into the phrase, where are they now, doesn't it? And it's kinda sad because I actually like Hoku's songs. They're not great by any means, but in a decade where female singers like to sing about sex and auto-tune their vocals to ungodly levels, I'm really glad that her songs avoided those cliches. And it'd be very interesting to see where her music could have gone next had she not been screwed over by her label. I mean, there are so many different directions she could have taken with her new album. She could have tackled alt-rock or indie rock or even blues or country. But sadly, it doesn't look like it's going to be happening anytime soon, if ever. And wherever she is now, yeah, that actually has meaning for once. I hope she's enjoying herself.
Come too soon.
Number 7! Carly Rae Jepsen. Like Ellie Goulding, Carly Rae is a competent singer whose songs have been plagued by relying too much on computer beats. Only her songs are far worse. I mean, give Golding's material some credit. At least the lyrics had some substance to them. Carly Rae's songs are about as interesting as a plastic cup. At least since Call Me Maybe.
Ah! God damn it with those close-ups. Back up a bit, will ya?
And yeah, even her earlier stuff wasn't all that great, but at least it had two things that I really wish she hadn't ditched since then. Acoustic folk influences and poetic lyrical structures. As for the synthesizer sounds of her later songs, well, as overused as they are, some of them are actually pretty good. Especially the ones in the opening to Call Me Maybe and some segments of Good Time. Put all the positive aspects together and get an actual drummer into the studio, and I think Carly Rae Jepsen could turn out some interesting material. Just as long as none of them are about boys or partying like she's still in her goddamn 20s.
Number 6!
Guns N' Roses, the post-Slash era. Let's make one thing perfectly clear here. I love Guns N' Roses. They're my third favorite band of all time. At least they were when Slash and Duff McKagan were still in it. Yeah, remember when all they needed was a hard rockin' sound of two guitars, and the bass lines could still be heard, and the drums sounded like thunder, and Axl Rose could sing great? Well, you won't find much of that on Chinese Democracy. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't a bad album, but as far as Guns N' Roses releases go, this one feels like the worst. I mean, this was the same band that recorded Welcome to the Jungle, one of my favorite songs of all time. You'd think they'd put out something more worthy of the name. If that wasn't embarrassing enough, for most of that era, just listen to Axl's live performances. Ugh. No wonder he's needed auto-tune for that album. But to be fair, he and the new band sounded just like the Guns N' Roses of old. Although that's mostly because they had to play all their classics alongside the new material. I hear they've been working on a new album since the release of Chinese Democracy, and I just hope it turns out better than the last one. But now that Slash and Duff are back in the band along with some of the newer members, it'll be pretty interesting to hear what they can do with the forthcoming album. If it ever comes to light.
Number 5!
Men at Work. You might know these guys for such hits as Down Under and... Actually, that's about it. And that's the problem right there. The media hasn't given their other work much attention, if any. Look, normally I wouldn't care if a lot of these bands fell into that status, but Men at Work is one of those exceptions, because their song Down Under, it's gotta be one of the most fascinating of all one-hit wonder bands. I mean, you should hear what they sound like, man! That could have put every other leading artist of that decade to shame if the record companies hadn't been so narrow-minded. And on top of that, they broke up after only making 3 albums, and haven't recorded anything else even after they reunited. And now that their flutist Greg Ham's dead, it doesn't look like we're ever gonna hear from these guys again. It's just a shame, because I think that with his amazing flute work, he could have fleshed out their sound even further. But who knows? If they ever do regroup again, getting a new flute player could really give them a creative boost.
Number 4!
Santana, the guest vocalist era. I've always considered Carlos Santana to be a god of the 6-stringed instrument. But like Guns N' Roses, he was at his best when the original band was there. Or at least when his albums didn't rely heavily on guest singers. Some of those songs were good, I'll give him that. But when he continued the trend after Supernatural, his integrity went right down the toilet. Except on Shapeshifter. Look, I know Santana wanted to do something different. But on those albums, it just really doesn't work. For one thing, some of the guest singers that sang on his songs didn't exactly fit his band's style. And even his trademark guitar licks and solos were just becoming repetitive. It's like he turned into a parody of himself. What made Santana's early material great was that it let the music speak for itself. You could feel the chemistry between each and every member of the band, and it was a truly magical experience. On their guest singer tracks, the focus is more on the singer and less on the band, which, to me, that's really distracting. If he's gonna have guest artists on his songs, why not work with people like Phil Collins or members of Rush, or at least someone who could offer something unique to help elevate the sound? Not people like Michelle Branch or Steven Tyler or Pitbull. I'm just glad that he finally got most of the original band back together for his latest album. And given how good that was, hopefully that's a sign of things to come.
Number 3.
UK. Don't know who these guys are? Well, I'll just give you a quick rundown. This was a band that Asia bassist and singer John Wetton used to front and play bass in before the song Heat of the Moment came out. Their sound, driven mainly by keyboards, violins, and drums, the first two instruments handled by multitasker Eddie Jobson, was nothing short of unique, and they used what they had to their full advantage. Sadly, they only made 2 albums throughout their short-lived existence, and even when they reunited about 30 years later, they still didn't record anything. Why? These guys had come a long way since then, and I think they could easily make another great album if they just agree to get back into the studio together. I mean, think about what they got to work with. You got Wetton and Jobson, who now have at least 40 years of experience, that great violin and keyboard-driven sound, a rotating cast of world-class drummers, and need I mention Terry Bozzio's enormous-as-hell drum kit? But I get it. They all have other projects they want to focus on, and let's face it, they're not exactly one of those bands that the world is demanding to hear more music from, except possibly for their more hardcore fans. But I'll keep my ears out for them. You can bet your ears on that.
Number 2.
Imagine Dragons. I've never been a huge fan of these guys, and their song Radioactive has just solidified that opinion. That song is riddled with problems, but when I listened to it more carefully not long ago, I found that their music did have some strengths after all. They had a nice atmosphere to them, and the guitar work was pretty damn impressive. I said in my Radioactive review that Imagine Dragons could have been the Pink Floyd of the 21st century. And you know what? I stand by that. They got all the ingredients there to make it possible. It's just a matter of them putting those ingredients to better use. But I will give their songs some more credit for improving over time. At least they abandoned such terrible cliches as those annoying electropop sounds and the whoa-oh-ohs. Seriously, how are those a thing? But even then, they're still a little too fixated on being pop songs. They don't go all out with what they got like a song should. And that's what's really holding Imagine Dragons back creatively. But who knows? Maybe someday they'll abandon the more poppy elements of their music and focus more on their strengths. Only then will their sound really flourish. But before I get to the artist who's wasted their potential the most, here are a few honorable mentions, because God knows that they've wasted their potential too. Mother Love Bone. It's sad that they broke up after their lead singer Andrew Wood died, because they only made 1 album, and they sounded like they could have been the next Guns N' Roses. But hey, at least we got Pearl Jam out of it, so it's not a total loss. One Direction. Yeah, this is one of those bands that you'd think that I'd hate, but yeah, there are some things I don't like about them, but they do have some style, they are good singers, and they got some cool guitar licks in there. Bring those to the forefront, and bring the more poppy elements to the back, and I think you'd have a pretty decent boy band of the 21st century. Flo Rida. He had one fun song that was called Low. After that, it kind of went down the drain. I mean, get rid of the poppy vocal melodies and the sampling, and I think he could be pretty good again. Nirvana. It's just too bad that Kurt Cobain lost all his passion and killed himself in '94. I mean, he did say in an interview that he wanted to continue as a singer-songwriter, I mean, think of all the influences he could have used to evolve Nirvana's music further. Jimi Hendrix. Had this guy not choked on his own vomit and died about 46 years ago, he could have taken his guitar god status even further like Eric Clapton and Buddy Guy and Slash. Oh well, at least the Hendrix estate was nice enough to release all his archive recordings.
And the artist who has wasted their potential the most is...
Lady Gaga. It's no contest right there. She considers herself to be a true artist, but her songs settle for that same electropop sound that everyone else is using. I'm sorry, that's not art, that's just being pretentious as all hell. Even Kanye West would agree with me on that. The only boundaries she's ever managed to push are with those weird costumes that she wears on stage or whatever other public appearances she's been to. But even then, she's just doing what Cher, Madonna, Gwen Stefani, and Marilyn Manson have been doing for years. Only her outfits are far more outlandish. She is a good singer though, I'll give her that. But yeah, she really needs to get her priorities straight, because her music definitely feels like an afterthought compared to her sense of fashion. It's like if Gigi Allen acted like an animal on stage, but his back catalog was nothing but castles and dragons and wizards. It just doesn't make any sense. Hi Lady Gaga. This is the music industry. If you're looking for the fashion industry, that's just down the street. If she ever wants to become a true artist and make us believe that she has more to offer like she's claimed in one of her interviews, then my suggestion is to ditch the computer sounds once and for all and actually, you know, be creative with your music. Hell, draw inspiration from different art mediums if you have to. It worked for Lana Del Rey. I'm the fantastic Mr. S, and just, seriously, so much promise. So much promise. Oh God. I don't understand. So much.